Morning friends, welcome to Ecoholics YouTube channel. My name is Avinash Agarwal, and in today's lecture I'll be discussing with you important current affairs for 13 June 2024. So what we are doing now from today onwards is slightly upgrading the methodology of our discussion. So not only will I be discussing, let's say, important articles out of the Mint newspaper which can help you in performing better in your examinations, but I will also be overlaying on top of that discussion certain questions that can be inspired from the articles that I am selecting for discussion. So like for example, today I have selected two articles for discussion. One is related to, let us say, healthcare expenditure in India, and the other one is related to the evolved or the upgraded methodology for household consumer expenditure survey that is carried out in India. So what you can see in front of your screen right up front are two questions. First question is, analyze India's healthcare expenditure disparities from the 2022-2023 HCES and assess the effectiveness of Ayushman Bharat. Discuss the urgency of upgrading public healthcare infrastructure for equitable access by 2047. So this can serve as a model question. This can serve as a guide, a milestone that, okay, I need to be able to answer these kinds of questions so that eventually my exam readiness is of the highest order. Second question is, how have recent methodological changes impacted the household consumer expenditure survey in India, and what are their implications for data quality and sampling techniques? So this is, you can see, a fairly difficult, a fairly technical, and a fairly in-depth question. As you know that Ecoholics is a platform for economics. Whether any examination you talk about IAS or IES or RBI or any examination that you can imagine in India, where economics is playing a role and economics related developments get questioned at an in-depth level, then these kinds of questions and the kind of discussion that will follow should be very, very helpful for you. If you like this approach of me overlaying question on top of articles that we are going to discuss, then do leave some comments in the videos in the section in the comment section of this video. Do like, share and subscribe our content if you are aligned with this idea. You need to approve or disapprove the idea. If you do not make any comments, or if you do not make any suggestions, then it will be very difficult for us to gauge what you are thinking. My sense is that you may appreciate this. This will give you a sense of exam relevance. This may give you a sense of that, okay, let me note down this question and let me develop few pointers around this question as a note. So this exercise will become very meaningful for you. That's my sense, which is why I'm doing this for you guys, right? But I would always want some validation to come in from your side as well. Let us start then. Let us move ahead. So let us discuss the first article that I have selected, public healthcare. Now, the point is that if you look at any survey of household expenses in India, it's not a perfect survey. It's not very accurate. It's not very precise, right? It doesn't cover obviously the entire population. That is impossible, right? There can be biases. There can be sampling errors, right? There can be so many problems that can creep into a survey, correct? But still, they say that hazy X-ray is better than no X-ray. A bad survey which gives us only an imperfect and an incomplete picture of what is happening is still a starting point, right? So that's not a justification for not doing our jobs well, but it's a starting point, and that's what our household consumption expenditure survey is, right? And the results that have been released for the 2022-23 round of the survey, it puts a spotlight upon the disparity that exists in India in a variety of different spheres. And in this particular article, we want to talk about the disparity related to healthcare expenditure in India. So if you see rural India, if you look at the averages first and foremost, if you look at the averages, so monthly medical expenditure per head in rural India is around 89 for hospitalization and 180 for other health needs. In urban India, it is 123 for hospitalization and 258, for other health needs. So you see that from a very average centric point of view, rural India and urban India, they aren't too far apart. But that doesn't mean that we can spend less and remain healthy. That just means that we're spending that less amount of money on healthcare probably means that we are living with a lot of ailments. So we'll just leave that averages part over there, and let's look at how the inequality or the disparity shows itself. So if you compare top 5% with the lowest 5%, what they spend on hospital care, so the expenditure differential or the expenditure difference is more than 100x, more than 100x. If you compare what the richest 1% spend and what the poorest spend on hospital bills, etc., then the difference is even more stark. The idea is that even at an anecdotal level, even at a very commonsensical level, we know as a matter of fact that in rural India you spend way less upon healthcare expenditure as compared to urban areas. Facilities in rural area, they are much, they are quantity wise, quality wise, way behind what exists in urban India. If you look at the doctor population ratio in urban India, doctor population ratio in rural India, all of those indicators will always tell you that our healthcare infrastructure, the hardware, the software part of it is being distributed in an inequitable manner across India and Bharat, so to speak, right? So obviously equal access to healthcare is a very important component of any government or any setup which talks about equality or having equitable access and so on. Okay. The unfortunate reality in India is that given the nature or the state of public healthcare infrastructure, people have to rely upon private sector. And private sector reliance upon private sector means that you will have hefty bills which you may have to pay out of pocket if you do not have insurance to cover that expenditure. Looking at the insurance penetration in India, it is not a surprise that a lot of people end up paying a lot of money out of their own pocket. If you look at public figures, when they go for, let us say, knee replacement or a heart surgery or X surgery or Y surgery, they often go to private hospitals in let us say NCR region or in any other region. So that also doesn't give a very good image to the public sector. For example, on the other hand, if by chance, let us say, some district magistrate in some district actually goes to a public hospital to get himself or herself treated or to have their baby, etc., that becomes a very big talking point that, oh wow, these district magistrates have gone to the government hospital, they are, this is so great, this is such a good example, etc., etc. Why does this become a news? This becomes a news because this is so rare. Anything which is rare, anything which is one off becomes a talking point. If something were regular, it wouldn't become a talking point, right? I mean, people fly by aeroplanes every day. It's not a talking point, right? But if you are the only one who are doing it, then it becomes a talking point. So the fact that public figures in power, in authority, they go for private alternatives and it doesn't cause any brouhaha, it doesn't cause any alarm anywhere, tells you what's happening in India. Definitely our medicines are quite cheap in India as compared to maybe international standards, but healthcare is getting dearer by the day, right? And the center has been doing what it can do. Like for instance, they have started this Ayushman Bharat scheme, whereby they are providing 5 lakh rupees worth of insurance to every family per annum for secondary and tertiary hospitalization. It's a good scheme, not a bad scheme at all. And I want you to be able to note down these numbers, that nearly 350 million cards have been issued so far, 30,000 hospitals have been empaneled so far, and 1.7 million admissions into hospitals were okayed in the last 30 days. So I want you to be able to, rattle off these numbers whenever you get an opportunity. But the important point over here is that all these numbers are pointing in the right direction. But when it comes to settling bills of hospitals, right? So then eligibility check, treatment check, etc., etc., and there's a lot of pendency. A lot of money is stuck in these pendencies. A lot of hospitals are wasting a lot of time getting their money cleared from the government, and the government is also wasting a lot of time ensuring that they are not being frauded, or they are not being defrauded, or they are not being taken for a ride by these smart and cunning hospitals, some of them who may be showing fake surgeries and fake bills, etc., just so that they can extract money out of the government's coffers. So both these ends have problems on their own side. Right now, whatever Ayushman Bharat may have been able to achieve, which is a good starting point, it is nowhere near the universal care approach that exists in a variety of different countries, where you can approach any public healthcare hospital, get quality treatment at no cost to yourself, and walk out of the hospital. And who pays the bill? Government pays the bill. So wherever universal care exists, first and foremost, what exists over there is a very strong network of public healthcare institutions. Very, very strong network. Very strong network. And on top of that is overlaid your universal care architecture. So what we need to do is that we are already spending a lot of money to boost infrastructure in India. We are already aiming for a Viksit Bharat by 2047. If we really want to have any meaning attached to that goal, then we also need to upgrade our public healthcare infrastructure, is the basic message out of this article. So I hope that the question that I had asked, you are getting few points related to that question. Again, to go back to the question that was asked, that assess India's healthcare expenditure disparities. I'm sure you can do this now. Assess the effectiveness of Ayushman Bharat. I'm sure that you can at least, attempt to do this now. And why should we upgrade public healthcare infrastructure? Maybe you may have to add few points from an external source over here, but I want you to be able to answer this kind of a question going ahead. Moving to the second article. The second article is again related to household consumer expenditure survey, but it is coming from a different angle. It is coming from the angle of methodology employed in the survey, in doing the survey, and what are the changes in that methodology that have been done as compared to, let us say, the previous surveys, why those changes were done, and what are the impact of those changes. I hope that you are absolutely clear why we are discussing what we are discussing. Household consumer expenditure survey is very important, and it has been very controversial. And if there is a change in methodology, then you should be aware at least, let us say, a 30,000 feet level, that what were the changes that were done, why were the changes done, and what is the impact of those changes. That is a basic thing that you should be able to understand. So I hope that this is very, very clear to all of us, that why we are discussing what we are discussing, right? So now what has happened is, recently that full report of the result is available, right? And there are a number of changes that have been done in the methodology, and there is a lot of commentary happening upon those changes. So the writer over here is, if I'm not wrong, was the Chief Statistic Officer, CSO of India, Chief Statistic Officer of India, right? Or something like that, a very prominent figure. I forgot the name of the writer. Very prominent figure. You can check it out with with just a Google search. Anyways, coming to the point. So there are changes in the schedule of inquiry. What is schedule of inquiry? So it's a survey, right? What do you typically do in a survey? Go around asking questions, right? That is inquiry. So when you go around asking questions, you should have a list of questions, right? Maybe you have divided that list of questions into different subsections, schedules, etc., right? So that is what we have done. We have brought some changes in the schedules of inquiry, right? So now what we have done is that we have created 4 subschedules. So 3 subschedules are food, FDQ, right? Consumables and services, right? And durables, okay? So these are durable goods. DG is durable goods, CS is consumables and services. And I'm reasonably sure that probably this Q is standing for maybe a questionnaire, because this is a list of questions that we asked to the respondents. So FDQ, CSQ, and DGQ, right? So these are your 3 subschedules, and then there is a 4th subschedule, which is household characteristics. I'm going into a household and asking these questions, right? So which household am I going into? Is it rich or poor? If it is rich, then what made me classify it as rich or affluent? If it is poor, what made me classify it as poor? Correct? So we also need to capture the characteristics of the households that are giving this answer. Let's say that you don't capture the characteristics of the household. Then I say that, I have been spending 1,000 rupees on healthcare. Who am I? What will you be able to make sense out of it? Nothing. So that's why first you need to, let's say, capture household characteristics. And then you need to start asking questions related to expenditure on food, expenditure on consumable, expenditure on services, expenditure on durables, and so on, right? So that's the basic idea. So what we do is that this HCQ schedule, right? This is something that we cover in the first visit to the household. We also cover one of the 3 questionnaires or the 3 surveys, and then we go 2 more times to that same household, and we cover the other subschedules. So what is going to happen hypothetically is that, let's say that I go to the household, I cover HCQ, which is obvious, the first thing to do, and then let us say that I cover CSQ, right? Then I'll go one more time, I will cover FDQ, right? Then I'll go one more time, and then I'll cover DGQ. Okay, so essentially what that means is that we are visiting the same household thrice to get the survey done. Okay, now this is a major change as compared to what used to happen in the past. In the past, what used to happen was that we used to cover this entire set of schedule, subschedule, etc. in one visit itself, right? In one particular order, right? So that was apparently a not so great design of the survey. Why? Because it becomes too long, too lengthy, and the person who is answering at the end, the person who's on the answering end of the survey, they start tiring out, they start losing interest. As a result of which, what happens is that questions which are at the bottom of the sequence, those questions don't elicit fantastic answers, good answers, great answers, credible answers, believable answers. That's the problem. Okay, so now what we have done is that, first of all, we are not doing it in one visit, we are doing 3 visits. Secondly, what we are doing is that we have randomized the sequence of the subschedules. So it's not necessary that all surveyors in India will first do CSQ, then do FDQ, then do DGQ. No, that's not necessary. So what we have done is that this order can change. This order of these 3 subschedules can change. So I need not necessarily have DGQ in my 3rd visit. I can have FDQ in my 3rd visit. I can have maybe CSQ in my 3rd visit. So as a result of which, what will happen is that I will get good answers for all subschedules, right? I'll get good answers for all subschedules in the sense that if, let's say, person is likely to give the best answers in the 2nd visit, 1st and the 2nd visit, then CSQ, FDQ, DGQ are equally represented in the 1st and the 2nd visit. And if, let us say, somebody is likely to give very short, crisp and uninterested answers in the 3rd visit, then CSQ, FDQ, DGQ are all likely to be in the 3rd visit. So there is no preference as such being given to any particular subschedule. Okay, so we are getting better answers since we have randomized the sequence. Point number 1, right? So like I explained to you that if you try to cover it in a single visit, the survey becomes too long, interview becomes too long, it can take as long as 3 hours, orders of items are also fixed. So as a result of which, what happens is that the interviewer loses interest towards the end of the survey, which creates a lot of errors, or which allows a lot of errors to seep into your survey. There is interviewer fatigue, there is respondent fatigue. Your last item, it gets poor quality answers. Households refuse to participate in such long surveys because they don't have that kind of time. So our National Statistical Commission, whose former head is writing this particular article, so they have recommended that we need to rationalize and simplify the National Sample Survey Consumer Expenditure Schedule. We need to rationalize the questions, rationalize the length, and so on, right? And we also need to reduce the bias on account of positioning. By account of positioning, in the sense that you have positioned questions in such a manner, and every household has, when you're answering question, you want to make yourself look good, right? Initially you want to make yourself look good. Slowly and steadily you start settling into the interview process. Slowly and steadily you start trusting the interviewer. Slowly and steadily you start giving the right answer. Are you getting my point, right? So all these biases that were there in the process from the interviewee side, right, have been removed to a great extent over here. Okay, under-reporting of non-food items such as durable goods and services, that gets reduced to a great extent. Okay, now what has been recently been observed is that there is a decline in the share of food in total consumption, right? Typically what happens is that you must be knowing there is something called as an Engel's law, that if I'm, let us say, within the poorer strata of the society, I'm more likely to spend a larger portion of my monthly expenditure on food items, and that expenditure, that share of expenditure on food items has undergone a decline, right? That's maybe because of this improved methodology, maybe because people have given you better information regarding their expenditure on durable goods and stuff, and maybe that's why your share of food in total expenditure has gone down, right? So there are, I'm sure, a lot of maybes over there, right? But this is what the article is discussing. Next important change that I want to discuss in the survey methodology is around stratification. So as you may be aware that we can stratify the society into, let us say, haves and have-nots. We can stratify the society along, I'm not saying we do that in the survey, but you can stratify the society along various different axes, right? Like, for example, you can also think in terms of doing a caste stratification. If you really want to understand how the variety of so-called upper caste and lower caste have been performing over the years, maybe you can do some kind of that kind of stratification also from a very sociological point of view. Anyways, coming back to my point, now what we are doing is that we are doing a survey where we are covering a sample of households. We cannot cover all the households in India. So we want to make sure that the sample that we have selected is representative of the heterogeneous population that exists in our country. So what we have done in this survey is that we have done multi-stage stratification. So what do I mean by multi-stage stratification? So at the first level, what I have done is that I have stratified the household based on distance from urban centers, right? So two stratas have been created based on that distance from the urban household. Now let us say that I go to a village, but any village, whether it is close to the urban center or farther away from the urban center. Once I go to the village, then what I do is that I do a second level of stratification based on affluence. That I will see that who is, let us say, a landowner in rural India and who is not a landowner in rural India, and I will make sure that landowners are also covered and those who are not landowners are also covered in my survey. Similarly, in urban India, I will go and see that who has a four-wheeler and who doesn't have a four-wheeler. So who has a four-wheeler, let us say, is a affluent household. Who doesn't have a four-wheeler, let us say, is not a affluent household. I'll make sure that both are covered in my survey. So this is the second level of stratification. Now this is much better than the earlier approach. In earlier approach, affluence was being decided on subjective parameters. There wasn't an objective decision making regarding who is an affluent household. So as a result of which, what used to happen was that the criteria being so subjective, right, that there used to be a non-comparability, that a particular household in a village may be selected as affluent, but that same household in another village may not be selected as affluent. And secondly, the problem was that your affluent households were being selected in such a subjective manner that there was underrepresentation of the affluent households to a certain extent, right? So because of the fact that better off households were not getting covered, that meant that expenditure on, let us say, durable goods and services was not getting adequately represented in the survey, or it was not getting reflected in our estimates, right? So what we are trying to do now is reduce subjectivity and make sure that our household selection is appropriate. Another very common misconception is that if, let us say, you have selected 10,000 households, then sample size should be related to population share, in the sense that if affluent households in totality, let us say, are, let's say, 25% households in rural India should be categorized as affluent because maybe 25% households are land-owning households in rural India, right? So in your survey, affluent households should also be 25%. There is no such correlation. There is no such direct correlation, is what the author is suggesting. What we rather do is that we try to oversample small or rare entities, so that we get a clear picture from these small or rare entities. Ultimately, estimates do not get affected by sample design, because when you do the estimation, what you do is that you pick up the expenditure estimates, etc., and then you use the multiplier which reflects the actual population share, right? Which reflects the actual population share. So we are discussing the hardcore technical nitty-gritty of how the sample design is actually done in this part of the article, and if you are not completely understanding it, is okay, right? Having a brief understanding is also going to be fine. Okay. Apart from that, what are the implications so far as our estimates are concerned, right? Now we have to remember that there is this suggestion that is made that why didn't we do the old survey along with the new survey, in the sense that we should have done two simultaneous surveys, one with the old methodology, one with the new methodology, and we could have compared the results and seen and reassured ourselves that the new methodology is actually better than the old methodology, right? So the point is that this was done to a certain extent in 2009 and 2011 when there were changes in the schedule that were done, right? Now the current HCS is already it's a very large sample of 18 households, okay, in each village. Now if you try to do, let us say, one survey with an old methodology, another survey with a new methodology on the first stage sampling unit, then you are adding to the cost and you are reducing the data quality, because who has 5 to 6 hours to answer your questions honestly, right? And let us say that you try two different sub-stratification strategies, right, and then do the survey. So again, there will be a lot of complexity, okay, given the fact that the old design already had very clear design flaws and there were very clear recommendations to move away and beyond it. There is no reason why we shouldn't have moved away or beyond it. The 2017-18 survey, whose data was junk, saying that the survey is of poor quality, etc. by the government. So the author is saying that maybe 2017-18 survey failed because of these design related complexities. And what the author is also suggesting, which is a very good suggestion, is that MOSPI should release that 2017-18 survey ka data along with the reasons for junking that data, because if that data was flawed, like for example 1999-2000 survey was also flawed, but the data sets are very much available, and that flawed survey is giving us a very good insight into why we should not do or adopt those kinds of methodologies. So similarly, if we can release, let us say 2017-18 survey ka data, and if we can learn something from it, there's no harm in it. So what is the conclusion? Conclusion is that we will be able to improve data quality, we will be able to improve the methodology, and we will be able to, take the best approach and move ahead with it, right? Requirement of comparable data is no reason to stop changes that serve a valid purpose, should be also a part of your reasoning. So as you can see, a very elaborate discussion on this question, that how have recent methodological changes impacted the household consumer expenditure survey in India, and what are their implications for data quality and sampling techniques. So if this kind of a question does get asked to you in the examination, you will be in a stronger position to be able to tackle this question. This is my submission to you today. If there is any question whatsoever, please feel free to ask. Otherwise, I will move ahead and meet you again tomorrow with a similar kind of an approach. Do leave your comments in the comment section, letting me know whether you approve of this methodology change on my part, where I am discussing or where I am overlaying questions on top of the discussion, so that you are able to find meaning and direction in an appropriate manner. Thank you so much. All the very best and Jai Hind to all of you. Bye bye.